Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I'm the author of 11 books. I am a CEO of 12 years. I am the founder of a startup set on data privacy that looked on taking on the likes of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram all under one roof. Wow. I am an elite performance coach of over 18 years, working with athletes throughout Europe, the United States to Australia. And most specifically and succinctly, I am the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance, specifically when it comes to tennis, uncovering the world first landmark findings, something we never thought was possible, but I'll tell you what it was and is how to develop a top 10 ranking. It is so exciting. I am behind theories from the optimal performance theory, the V by Dr. Berge to the rule of transference, having coined terms from the barrier breaker to the golden rule and quite a few others. As has become custom with each episode, we're going to dive into one of my books to share additional insights. And if you have been following along, first of all, thank you so much. Your feedback is incredibly appreciated. Keep it coming. If this is new for you, feedback, send it my way. And thank you so much for tuning in. But the book we have been focusing on is The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, a comprehensive discussion on developing elite coaches and players. And we're going to dive into a chapter, pull it apart, share additional insights, because at the end of the day, Beyond Top 10 Tennis is all about the pathway and those nitty-gritty little details of really what it takes to develop a top 10 ranking. And let's be honest here, and also even more clear and succinct, everything here is 100% backed by science, the science and the data. And so there are no fables or tales here. We are talking the absolute factual truth when it comes to data, science, and producing optimal performance outcomes, which in this case is a top 10 tennis ranking. Okay, buckle in, get set. I'm really excited to share today's episode, and I hope you walk away with some really good takeaways you can apply in your own training load and practices on your road towards that end goal. Today's episode is on 2.7 mindfulness, away from the training grounds. Now, if you'd like to follow along, we're on page 87. And I think it's so important to share that this book was written now. It was released over 6 years ago. And even though it has been updated with, I guess most excitingly, its most recent edition out last year, the most exciting part about it is not only its relevance and applicability, that it really establishes the foundations of what it takes to, again, develop that top 10 ranking. So irrespective if you are that 12, 13-year-old or even that 8, 9-year-old, these are steps to implement into your training practices. Though, on the other hand, if you're that 18 and 19-year-old and you're gaining new insights here, they're just as important. And, the same goes for that 25, 26-year-old. You're on the WTA and or ATP tour at this stage. It's still applicable because irrespective of where your training is at, where your training load is at, there's always something new you can learn and implement it to your own training style. And look, today's episode on mindfulness, it's so, relevant and important. And I guess what I'm sharing is that it was been relevant for such a long time that it made its way into this book. Irrespective of the new edition coming out, it's been there from the very beginning. And I'm going to date myself here a bit, but over 20 years ago, and that's over, when I was playing and training, mindfulness was integrated into our training. And I remember focusing on it and implementing it, becoming a daily habit. And it's over 2 decades ago. And it astonishes me that so many athletes and players, irrespective of what sport you're in, one, it is so important to consider implementing mindfulness into your current and or future training load. And two, to remember the different terms associated with mindfulness does not distract from, its precedent and its underlying meaning. And the subtext there is that mindfulness comes in other terms and banners, which when I was playing, we looked at mental toughness through to mental conditioning, which is still relevant. And I'm so confident that you're listening, you've heard of those terms, but just maybe you've never, flipped it to say, oh, maybe that actually corresponds with, those underlying meanings of mindfulness. And every, term, analogy is going to be slightly different, but at the end of the day, they all come in, they're all encompassed inside that same spectrum of that mental capacity to being mindful. And mindfulness, it can be just as simple as walking onto the court, onto the field, into the pool with that intention. You are mindful of what you are doing. And that correlates with mental toughness. It does not mean you have to be the strongest out there. No. Mental toughness correlates with mindfulness, how you're thinking, how you structure your thoughts, and how you implement them into your ultimate performance. The same goes with mental conditioning. And maybe you haven't thought of it like this before, but mental conditioning, it really is practicing and implementing the tools associated with mindfulness. Now, mindfulness can be just so incredibly simplified, though there are so many underlying behavioral traits that we can work on and fine-tune on a daily basis. And the best part, when it comes to sporting performances, it's endless with how you can quiet that outside noise to really narrow in, zone in on that performance outcome, irrespective of what you're working on that day, and then transfer that over into your performances. So into that event, into that tournament, irrespective, into that game. And I think that's the best part. And that is directly associated with when we're looking at the pathway towards that top echelon of the rankings, is that if you can begin to implement these practices in that foundation, you're setting yourself up for success, irrespective if you decide to become a professional or not. And I think that is the most rewarding, objective here, because there are so many life lessons that are transferable from sport into life. Ask any athlete that has either retired or they finished early, and as a professional, how those lessons have allowed them to then succeed in their professional endeavors. Though, obviously that's another topic. But mindfulness is just so fundamental, and too often than not, I just see it being neglected. And if we can flip that switch from mental toughness, mental conditioning, and mindfulness, oh my goodness, I mean, specifically the last couple of years, irrespective of where you are in the world, we all know what has happened. We all know from the strains that has happened to each individual has been impacted in different ways, shapes, forms, and it's completely normal. There is not one person in this world that has not been touched, whether directly or indirectly, by what has happened around the globe over the last few years. And one of the powerhouses to allow humans, because again, we like taking that humanized approach at Beyond Top 10 Tennis. It's so important to recognize that we are all individuals, we are all humans, and mindfulness has been incredibly pivotal to that, I guess, coping process. And even if you haven't needed to call upon that, I am sure there is someone that you know directly that has, and that's just the most rewarding part of being able to grasp it and implement it in your own training practices. And if you're the parent and or guardian out there listening, take note for your child to implement. And if you are that player, work with your coach to implement these practices. And if you're that coach, take a seat and think about your planning through that periodization, that chart work that's underway, that you're doing, and think, how can I optimize that level of mindfulness to correlate with where we're going and what we're doing? Okay, that was actually a very big, I guess, start here. But like I said, page 87, here we go. Traditionally, in the coaching context, all the work that goes into developing an athlete has been done on or inside the training grounds. That is, training has classically been all practical, working on varied performance measures, i.e. techniques to positional players. Due to the average higher performing, the elite athlete these days being physically very similar to their competitors, albeit still with slight strengths and weaknesses, their mental toughness becomes key to their performance success. This mental toughness has been established long before this elite status was reached. And this is one, it's so exciting but so rewarding again, because at the end of the day, the direct correlation between these slight advantages, which when you're looking at the top 20 players and then what it takes to become a top 10 player, we're in mere percentages. And it's something I refer to as the 1%ers in, a lot of my work. And that is all it takes at times. And it can be the difference between winning that Grand Slam championship to not. Percentages are what makes a player cross that threshold into the top 10 to what keeps a player at top 50 in the world, and they never crack the top 20. We know this, and it's down to that minuscule level, but that's the exciting part when you get towards the elite echelon of play, is that if you know what you're doing and if you can gain the advantage of knowing what it really takes to get into the top 10, well, you want to tune in, right? You want to head to AMA International, of course you do. And I guess the best part is that not only do we know it's possible, but we know those variances, the percentages that really matter and count, that allow athletes to cross over into the top 10. But obviously, where am I going here? When it comes to mindfulness, it is a direct trait. And so a direct correlation, and it's a weapon of choice in the best possible way to fine-tune and use to your advantage. And the best part also is that it's off court. It's not on court. You are conditioning these habits initially off court, and then you implement them, of course, on court. But it's the way you condition yourself to think. It's the way you condition yourself to structure those points, those plays, those games. And it's also the way that you have the capacity to quiet that outside noise. And it's also a way where you take in that new knowledge, hopefully the 7 keys, and how you progressively implement that and them into your training load, your practices, and ultimately your performance. And by doing that, that is a key facet to delivering an optimal performance, and obviously the name of the book. But there's so much, I guess, more on one hand, but then on the other, there really isn't, because being mindful simplifies that whole process in the best possible way. Though to begin with, you really need to grasp the concept and then develop it. And it's potentially such a more foreign concept for the developing players. So let's say 15 and under, for example. And if you can learn this and fine-tune this and condition this and integrate this into your training load now, wow, you are setting yourself up with such the best intent and intentions for that next 10 years of play and that long game. If, however, you are that 21, 22, 23-year-old, you are on the WTA or ATP tour, and you are trying to figure out, crack the code. That's something I love calling it. To be able to ascend towards the top 50, top 30, top 20, top 15, and eventually have your crack at the top 10. These are practices you can implement, and there's a very good chance you're already implementing them. So ask yourself, where is the gap? Where is that knowledge gap, and how can you close in on it? 1, head to AMA International, learn the 7 keys, please. Or obviously, or keep listening, please, because over time we will get there. And that's what's so important about that mindfulness and being conscious of the long game, is that it doesn't happen overnight. It takes work to get there, but it's progressive. It does not mean let's learn the 7 keys all in just 1 week and do it. No, that is not how it works. I would love to tell you, sure, 7 days, find 7 keys, there you go, top 10 ranking. No, it takes so much more than that. And too often than not, that is the direct opposite of being mindful. So integrate it, which is so exciting because I haven't thought about this for such a long time, or maybe not even in this way, which I guess is a real blessing to be able to share that mindfulness is actually integrated in all of the work, because you need to, 1, learn to, I guess, increase that knowledge uptake, increase the knowledge and level of awareness about one key to the next, but over a period of time, to allow yourself enough time to, again, 1, become familiar with it, 2, to condition this to an extent that it's autonomous in your training, in that load, and in your performance outcomes. And once you reach that level and you're still maintaining that level of mindfulness, then you are ready. Only then you are ready to move on to the next key, and so on and so forth. But it's so integral to remain mindful. And of course, with each key comes a baseline level, which is eventually increased over time, depending on your level of play, which, if you are not able to be mindful, consciously aware of what it takes, what you're doing, what you're working towards, and its relevance. No, it doesn't work like that. I would love to tell you that's the case, but there's a reason why the best players in the world, the 1%ers, either stay there and get there in the first place. But look, there's also a reason why too often than not, players enter the top 10 and then a few weeks later, they're out again. Or eventually, they've been there for a while and then they slip back out. And I think it's so important to recognize that if that mindfulness of what they're doing and their awareness around those keys is not upkept at that level, then we know that is, I guess, a direct consequence that they do slip out of that ranking threshold. All right. Mindfulness is a component of mental toughness and plays a significant role in an athlete's developmental years and thus contributes to their ultimate mental toughness in the years to come. Although mindfulness has varied meanings and understandings, in the developmental sense, in the sporting environment, mindfulness in its simplest form encompasses goal setting, goal projections, training with purpose, positioning with intent, deciphering varied scenarios of play, and continual questioning, to name a few. Isn't that amazing? Because I know I wrote this, though at the same time it sums it up so clearly, because maybe you've never thought of goal setting as being mindful, but think about it. You need to sit down and really be intentional when you're writing out those goals. Where do you want to go and how are you going to get there? Let's think about it and let's be really conscious and mindful. And your goals directly are correlated with mental conditioning, because that's exactly what you are doing. It's a direct facet of that. And it's those behaviors of that intention and the goal setting and what's involved, that's mindfulness. And that's incredible. And again, if you're listening, hopefully you have those goals and that you have been put through your paces in respect to writing them down. And I really hope that, your screensaver, I was going to say, you've written them down as well. But if they're in a notebook, hopefully then you're reading it on a regular basis. And then if it's not on your phone, then hopefully it's in your bedroom room and it's on your wall where you see it every day. And you're so familiar with it, and being able to just take a minute and to review, go over those goals, you're being mindful. And that's incredible. We can look at those goal projections of where you want to go. So you've got those goals, you've done the planning, but how are you going to get there? And when I say projections, we can look at the rule of specificity. So we're really just being specific here and going, all right, what do I want to accomplish this week? And then what about next month? Maybe I am working on my slice and maybe I really want to get it smoother. I want to stay lower and glide through and have a really low margin for error. Just as an example, how long are you going to set yourself? Maybe in the next 2 to 3 months, that is something you're really focused on and it's one of your projections. It could be performance specific to a result, that in the next 6 months, I want to reach the 3rd round. In the next 12 months, I want to win my first challenger event. If you're at tour level, in the next 6 months, I want to break into the top 50. Or in the next 12 months, I want to win a tour title. It varies, but make sure you are being mindful when you're setting those projections. And this is obviously correlated then with your training with purpose. I cannot tell you how often I have spoken to an athlete, to worked with an athlete, and asking them up front, what's their intention? What are they working on? Where do they want to go? And it's a blank, which is a red flag that they're not being mindful. So on the other side is the number of athletes that I've overseen, and I've asked them that question about, what are you working on? What are you working on if you're a coach at the moment? Like, where are you going? And just know, they do not have that training with purpose. I talk to so many coaches and it is the same. The planning is not there, or the planning's there but it's the same for everyone, which if you're listening, that's a red flag. That is a no. Because again, going back to that humanized approach, we are all humans, but we are all individuals, and only then are we that athlete or that player. So please do not mistake that for just grouping all the players and athletes under one banner, because that is not how it works. And if you're listening, shaking your head, this is the science talking, which means if you're shaking your head, shame on you. That means that you don't believe the factual data out there. So this is about upskilling, re-educating if you're looking at working with an athlete to get them towards that top 10 ranking. Now, if you do not take this seriously, fair game. I know, and so we know, that irrespective of what athlete you're working with, they are not getting anywhere close to the top 10. And that's heartbreaking. So if you are that player athlete out there, make sure you're asking your coach the hard questions to ensure they are, one, mindful themselves, but two, mindful of. It's just so important to implement these practices and integrate them into your own training loads, and making sure that you are training with purpose. Now, training with purpose is as simply as walking on the court and knowing what you're working on today. Training with purpose is about, what are you doing at training? How is this going to cross over into your match play? What are you working on? Why are you working on it? Let's pull it apart, then put it back together, and let's work towards that end result, that end outcome that you desire. So when you have that sense of purpose, that's also being mindful. The positioning with intent, that's making sure, when obviously there are different connotations here, but I'll go with, when you're moving around the court, around the pool, up and down the pool, and around the field. When you're moving, why are you moving? Where are you moving? And what is your intent? And I mean, that positioning is just so fundamental. When we're looking at tennis specifically, you have certain technical parameters, and if that load, that leg drive is not there, it's not present, then what's your positioning doing? And it's really working on that, loading up that kinetic chain and understanding how that works, shifting that center of gravity to make sure it's in alignment with your, that ball's trajectory and its projection. All right, where's that sense of mindfulness and that intent? I'm not going to give it all the way there, but I kind of just dropped one of the keys. But it's so important to have that level of mindfulness throughout, your movement, and to position yourself for the best chance of producing that optimal performance outcome. And look, this goes in hand with deciphering varied scenarios of play. Where's your anticipation? This is especially on court, in games, on the field. What is your opponent doing? Where's that next play coming from? How are you going to set up the next point? And how are you going to react? So it's your reaction as well, and the time associated with that. What is your level of anticipation? Are you being mindful of that? Are you aware? Are you conscious? So it's, again, integrating this into your practices, into your training load. Obviously, not all of this all at once. No, it's a build, it's a progression. It could take you 2, 3, 6 months to specifically work on that level of anticipation, deciphering those varied scenarios. Because we all know, irrespective of what sport you are in, there are so many countless scenarios, and it's so important to become familiar with these. Again, if you're at that developmental level, you've got a head start. If you're implementing this, or you're going to start to, yes. If you are that 19, 20-year-old, that 25-year-old, it's not too late. You could be ranked, you're 100 in the world, 80 in the world. Work on that level of anticipation, and that is going to nudge you closer towards that top 10 ranking. It's not going to get you there, no, but it's going to nudge you closer. And then you're going to begin to integrate and implement the 7 keys. That's going to get you closer. But we're setting up let's say the baseline here, which is so fundamental and so important. And continual questioning. And we're going to finish on that, because questioning, it is so important. And I think I was so lucky at a young age. I want to say I was in primary school. Maybe I was 10 or 11. And I remember asking my mum, I don't get it. And she encouraged me to ask questions. And I did not know back then how powerful that was, because that just ignited that fire inside me to ask and ask and ask. And by that I mean continually question. If you do not understand something, ask it. Ask it again, and never apologize for asking, because the more you ask, more often than not, the smarter, 1, you are, and 2, you will get. And it really comes with that inquisitive nature and being, again, conscious of that and mindful. So if you are mindful again of what you are doing, where your training is going, what your goals are, what you're heading towards, and you're able to continually question and to work harder and to get better and ask those questions, you are setting yourself up for success. And most importantly, you are empowering yourself and pushing yourself closer and closer towards that top 10 tennis ranking. Thank you so much for listening today. We got carried away, I think, in the best possible way, because mindfulness, there's so much to it, but then on the other hand, there's not. It's really pulling back those layers and unwrapping everything as simple from a goal to a question. And that maybe you've never thought of before, the more simplified side of mindfulness. And sometimes all it takes is to just be conscious and aware, to take those deep breaths, sit down, write a few things down, and really be intentful of it. And there you go. You are practicing and implementing that mindfulness. And obviously when it comes to your sporting performances, that goal setting as well, that mental conditioning to that mental strength, that mental toughness, it's all integrated into that banner. To get a copy of The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, please head on over to AM8 International. That is am8international.com. For any comments or questions, please head on over to AM8 as well, or to Topic Thread. That is the only social network that I'm on. Or for something a little bit different, my fictional release that actually came out last year is at Pink Octopus Books. I will leave all all the links in the bio, so in the show notes. So please check them out. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, follow, like, share. That would be absolutely phenomenal, because at the end of the day, the more we can get those keys out there, those optimal performance practices out there, that is sensational, and we're lifting the game up even further, which is so incredibly exciting and rewarding. On that note, I am so grateful. Thank you so much for listening. Please keep those comments coming, and thank you so much for bearing with us, for bearing with me as we've been fine-tuning and learning the ropes here. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. I am your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.